been a minute.
Whoa. Okay, cool. Why don't we start with, I know we've already done this once. By the way, thank you for coming back. I know we've already done this once. Episode 16, you came on and talked to us a little bit, but we needed to recap. It's been almost 5 years now, or 5+ actually. So why don't you start with just like introduce yourself and tell everybody what you've been up to?
Yeah, so my name is Michael Dolan, born and raised in Austin, Texas, and for the last 4 years, a majority of my time outside of working in software as a QA, I have been competing in axe throwing. So I think the last time we talked, I was still doing like a lot of improv classes and graduated from Coaltown Theater, which unfortunately they no longer have a building. That got closed during the pandemic. But yeah, so I stopped doing improv and found axe throwing randomly. Like I went to a charity event for November that they were hosting, found that, and then immediately just kind of fell in love with the sport and kept going back, joined league, and yeah, now almost 5 years of throwing axes. I've like it's pretty much consumed all my free time, as well as extra money. So
yeah, that's crazy. I saw that you won several competitions. I saw you with one of those like big novelty checks or something.
yeah 2021 was a weird year, I think, just because like in my life I never really flew anywhere. Like I very rarely traveled outside of Austin growing up. I feel like we would go to Oklahoma as a kid. Like my family reunion would be every year in Oklahoma in a very small town called Miami. Spelled like Miami, but you know it's Oklahoma, so they don't know how to pronounce things. But yeah, man. Yeah, I go to family reunion every year, and besides that, I mean that was just like the kind of classic road trip style family thing. But I'd flown to Vegas and I'd flown to San Francisco before my first international flight to Toronto, which was for the World Championship in 2020. And then the next month, everything in the world shut down. And then between January and December of 2021, I flew like 8 or 9 times to different cities within the US to compete. So it was a very strange year, I think, for me, just because I was like, oh, like I'm actually going places and doing stuff, even though like, you know, there's all these crazy restrictions and you got to wear a mask everywhere and blah, blah, blah. But for me, it's like, I just needed to get out of the house because working from home, like doesn't really satisfy my extroverted personality. So
that's so nuts. Were you guys still competing during like the pandemic? Did that shut down for a little bit?
It did shut down for a little bit. So Toronto 2020 happened in late February. So that was the International Axe Throwing Championship of 2020. So went to Toronto, came back, and then it was like March 26th that everything kind of shut down here in the US, right? Yeah. So everything shut down. I got laid off from my job. Well, I was furloughed for like 6 months and then got laid off. About 2 months into the pandemic was when Urban Axes here in Austin reopened. So late May, basically, I was able to kind of get back and start throwing again, but it was, you know, everyone was wearing masks. You kind of had to throw by yourself or with a very small group. They slowly started to introduce leagues back once, you know, the stage 4 kind of kicked back in here in Austin. So, but it was like instead of 30-person leagues, it'd be like at most 16, because they would take the leagues and split them up into 2 different time periods. So like you either threw between like 6 and 8, or you threw from 8 to 10, kind of thing. And so it was definitely weird at first. I think it, you know, everything was just constantly changing. So we all just kind of had to go with the flow and figure it out as we went. But yeah, so throwing with a mask definitely presents its own challenges because of, you know, especially me being someone who wears glasses 24/7. Like you had to kind of figure out tricks to like not get your glasses to fog up. So I have to like, not only do I have a large face and a beard, but I had to like figure out how to, take care of that. So I would use like the surgical mask, and I'd pinch them really tight against my nose, wear them really high, and then I had to like wear my glasses out here like a grandpa. So, so it was definitely interesting. I feel like it was definitely challenging at times, especially when it's already hot and you're sweating, and it's like, you're wearing this mask and you're just breathing hot air on your face, and it's just like, okay, well, this is a whole new take on like competitive axe throwing.
Yeah,
But
man.
yeah,
I know that move with the like pinch the thing really hard, like the nose clip, and then pull the glasses down. I wear glasses occasionally. Um,
yeah,
but it's just like a dose of reality. As soon as the mask goes on, they fog up immediately. It's like, oh fuck, I forgot about this. Damn it.
yeah,
Was
yeah,
there?
yeah. My girlfriend got glasses for the first time during the pandemic. She was like, "Oh, I can see actually," and I was like, "Yeah, yeah, glasses are great." But she like, it took her a while to like figure out the trick, and I'm like, and telling her, I'm like, "You got to do this and do it," and she just was like, "Okay, whatever."
And then pull your
But sorry, what
glasses
were you
way
saying?
forward.
Yeah,
I gotta wear them on the end of my nose. Like, yeah, pull them way forward. Um,
yeah,
I was gonna ask if at some point, I know for me, like whenever the world shut down, quote unquote, for the pandemic, I was doing carpentry and just like making furniture and stuff. And of course, all of that was just like everybody just kind of freaked for a moment where they were like, oh fuck, like no more furniture, no more anything, no more gatherings, no more like go get groceries and then hunker down. Was there a point where you're like, God, this is so stupid? Like, I, for me, it was like, well, I got to figure out what to do. Like, I can't rely on making furniture all of my life. Was there a point where you're like, I can't, I can't just throw axes? Like, what was going through your head at that point where it was like, yeah, no more stuff, or were you just like getting into it at that point? I mean, you said,
yeah. So when the pandemic hit, so I started November 31st of 2017. So it was like, I think our first interview was like March 30th, and then that November I started throwing axes.
yeah,
So I'd already been throwing for going into 2020 almost 3 years, or a little over 2 years. So I was already pretty much sold on, I'm gonna do this for the rest of my life kind of thing.
yeah,
um, so the World Axe Throwing League. So there's the IATF, which is like how Urban Axis and a bunch of other battle venues and things like that. That's how they all run their venues, is under the IATF. And then there's all these other venues that run the WATL, which is the World Axe Throwing League. They actually did a quaddle league, which was the quarantine axe throwing league. So if you had a target at your house, you could basically just film yourself throwing, and you could compete against other people like that. So like
nice.
axe throwers figured out a way to like run league basically online. Unfortunately, I didn't get to be a part of that because I live in an apartment, so it
Yeah,
wasn't an option for me. But for me, yeah, I mean, I think when things shut down, like I don't have a background in computer science or like a degree. I kind of lucked into my QA job, 5 years ago, where I was working at a AT&T store or a Verizon store, and the VP of my company was a customer, and he was like, "Hey, I think you make a good QA," and I was like, "What's a QA?" And like I literally got handed this opportunity to go basically learn on the job as a QA. So when I got let go, I was like, dude, I'm never gonna find another QA job. Like I was freaking out about that, because I was like, I spent the last 4 years or whatever trying to learn this skill and like make this my career, and now I'm like gonna be shit out of luck unless I could find another QA job, and no one was hiring.
yeah,
Right, like not a single company here in Austin was looking for anybody, because almost everyone had to like lay off 50% or more of their employees.
right.
So that was the part that kind of freaked me out the most. The toilet paper shortage thing was really fucking stupid. I'm like, how much toilet paper do people really need? Like I bought like a big thing of it, luckily, like right before everything shut down, and that lasted me all the way until like December. So I'm like,
Yeah,
who is shitting so often that they need like a closet full of toilet paper? Uh,
yeah.
but
I
yeah,
bought a bought a bidet right before that, and I was like, "This, I'm psychic. I don't know how I knew this was gonna happen, but
Yeah, you had the spidey senses of the butthole,
totally,
whatever
yeah,
that equivalent is.
yeah, yeah. I get the same tingly spidey senses, except for it's around the anus. So it's like,
Just
uh,
the little wiggles. I don't know if you ever seen
yeah,
like the comics, like when he gets his spidey sense, he'll always get the little wiggles.
there's little
It's
black,
the same thing. It's just your butthole.
yeah,
Whatever.
yeah. Like he's farting. Like, no, it's
Yeah,
something
no,
special, actually. It's something important. It's something important about the future.
it's the quivers, the butt quivers.
Yeah.
Uh,
I'm just
but
imagining
yeah,
a bunch of like axe marks in your apartment wall, like if you were to
I
your
wish.
landlord.
If
Like
I
what?
was a dumber person, probably. If I
Yeah,
didn't want,
totally.
like, if I didn't care about getting my deposit back.
Yeah, yeah. It just looks like Jack
um,
Nicholson there from The Shining.
exactly. Yeah.
Do you
But
have a
yeah,
bunch of
man.
like?
So
Sorry, go ahead.
go ahead.
I was just gonna jump
I
right.
was just gonna say, yeah, it was definitely tough to like kind of figure out like how to figure, like how to find another way to like spend my time, because I was without work. I was just getting like federal income or whatever for, like I said, like 6 months. So I didn't do anything for 6 months. So luckily, like I said, Urban Access was only closed for about 2 months, and then I, was able to go in and start throwing again, because that really helped me, just because like mental health, like I was just kind of deteriorated just sitting at home. I was
Yeah, man.
constantly not being able to like go out and do things or see, the people I liked. So yeah.
Yeah, that's rough. Do you have a bunch of like rad axes, like a bunch of like cool inlays? And I feel like that's the next
Yeah.
obsession. Like once you get good at axe throwing, then like it's axe collecting, right?
Yeah,
Like,
pretty much. I mean, I have like 40 axes. I And I'd say like the majority of the ones I throw are all custom, so they're anywhere from like 300 to like $600, just depending on like what axe I'm throwing that day. But yeah, I have some pretty cool axes. 81 axes. It's a maker named Goose. Yeah, he lives in Canada, and he's made me some really cool stuff. So I have like a custom. Uh, it's a bloodwood with a white epoxy, and it's got little custom like handmade maple leaves in it. So it's
oh,
got like
cool.
4 or 5 like little maple leaves up the stem of the handle. So yeah, I had like that one. I had another one that was similar to that one that had like little hexagon patterns. So it looked like a little honeycomb pattern inside of some epoxy. That
Cool.
one was pretty sick. But yeah, I just recently got a custom plum. So like it's a vintage plum head on a like black and blue like skateboard veneer handle that Philly Axco, Vin Crescenzo, the guy out of Philly, makes. So yeah, I have just a bunch of different axes. My normal axe maker is a guy here in Austin. His name's Curtis Atkins. He owns a company called Curdax Customs. So you can find him on Instagram, but he makes most of my axes for me. My custom axes all have 3 stripes in them now, because I wear like Adidas all the time. So I decided to kind of copy the Adidas logo, but the middle stripe's a little bit fatter so that they can't sue us for trademark. So
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, because you probably need to keep track of your axes if you're throwing with someone. Like you'd have to, I don't know. Not like it's
yeah, I think for me it's like what I what I what I like about custom handles is you can kind of figure out what you do and don't like about throwing other people's handles, right? So like, do you want a more square handle? Do you need a curved handle? I want this, 16 and a half length. Um, the diameter matters because, everyone's hand shape is different, right? So it's like I have a much larger hand than, my girlfriend, right? So like the type of handle that I need for my axe is going to be slightly different from what she needs. I throw a slightly heavier axe than what she wants, than what she throws. So it's like you kind of play around with like different types of custom wood and things like that because they all have different weights. It's like most of the core of my handles is either ash or hickory.
yeah.
Hickory is typically a little bit denser, And then I just do like custom woods. Like black palm is one of my favorites. It's a beautiful wood. And then one of my other sets that I have, like, so I have a big axe and a hatchet that both have like lace wood and wenge stripes. So it's pretty cool, man. Like I've learned a lot about that stuff just because I've like had so many like new custom axes. I'm like constantly like researching, like, oh, like what's the next thing I'm gonna get, you know? So it's like I really love like orange osage and bloodwood. Lacewood's really cool. Yeah, but there's so many like really cool like natural woods out there.
Yeah, you become a like a minor hobbyist in woods by
Yeah,
default. Also, yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. My buddy Curtis, he owns an AP shop, or AV shop is what I meant to say. But his garage, I mean, you would walk in, you're like, oh, this dude makes like custom furniture or something. He's got like every tool you would ever need for work, for like woodworking, and it's
yeah,
just to build handles on the side, like occasionally for people. Like it's pretty nuts. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
that's great. Have you ever actually like chopped what like went out to the woods and or maybe not even the woods, but like gone out in nature and like chopped wood with an axe?
I mean, not in any recent years. I think I did it when I was much younger, at a friend's property. Like we were like just like splitting wood for firewood. But yeah, it's like I wasn't like, you know, it's not like I paid attention to what I was doing back then. I was just swinging an axe at a you know, to try and split some wood. Like I didn't know what I was doing. Nowadays, I'd probably have a much better technique, since I actually know how to like handle a big axe.
Yeah, man. Is there okay? Let me paint a picture. You now know how to handle an axe. You have come out to the mountains for the weekend and you need to split a couple of logs of wood. While you're splitting some wood, you look up and there is a bear charging towards you. How confident are you at throwing this axe and stopping this wild animal from mauling you?
um, I I mean, I guess it depends if I have fight or flight
Yeah.
mentality, right? But I'd probably shit my pants first, and then I'd try to throw it. I'd probably freak out, honestly, and miss really badly.
Yeah.
But if I for some reason I was able to kind of muster up like the mental focus to throw, like I know how I can throw it, probably pretty well. Like I may
Yeah.
not necessarily hit it with the blade, but I definitely hit it with the axe. So right,
General.
so it's like, because yeah, like I mean, I'm used to throwing from the same distance, you know, pretty much more or less for the last 4.5 years. So it's like I know how to throw like underhand big axe, and like I usually throw from about the 17-foot line. Um, I know how to do like 1.5 rotation, 2 rotation, so I can throw from a little bit different distances. But you know, if with a moving target, it's like who knows like exactly where the axe would hit it. But
Yeah.
I'd probably be able to at least, you know, kind of like tag it with the handle or something.
Sure. I was about to put you on my zombie apocalypse team, but I maybe not now.
Yeah, you want someone who throws no spin knives. That's what you want. If you
Yeah.
want someone to to hit moving targets like that.
Yeah. I need like Gambit from the X-Men, except for with like small knives or something. Have you
Exactly.
ever have you ever gotten like really hurt?
I have not. No, I mean I've gotten a few scratches and things here and there just from like sharpening axes, but nothing serious.
Yeah. Anybody like in the axe throwing world like I feel like
Not
I feel like there's so much
yeah.
liability there that it must be common, but maybe I'm completely wrong.
Yeah, I mean, so Urban Axis has not had any major incidences, right? So like there's a coach with you in the lane at all times. So like you know, there's people drinking and throwing axes all the time. So it's like they actually monitor people and like make sure like, hey, like, you know, don't be an idiot. Like, you know, don't grab the sharp end, you know, things like that. Like, you know, you don't hand anyone an axe. If people are throwing too, like if people are just being assholes, throwing too hard and it's bouncing back constantly, stuff like that, they'll just pull them out of the arena and tell them they can't throw anymore. But for the most part, like the only people I know, like my friend Bill, who actually does an axe throwing podcast, he was getting warmed up to throw for a qualifier, and he accidentally dropped the axe and tried to catch it with his hand and split his hand open.
Oh,
So there's things like that where like people accidentally do that to themselves.
yeah.
I know one other person that was throwing knives, and I think they bounced up and like the knife like got him in the shin, like
Ooh.
stuck him in the shin. But those are like two incidences that I know of. Like I really don't know many more. Yeah, it's fairly uncommon. I think most of the time people are pretty cautious and like they understand it's like you're throwing something with a sharp blade, like don't be dumb.
Yeah, yeah.
So
There's this weird like bartender reflex. When I was tending bar, I was living with this guy, and if you drop a bottle, like a glass bottle, you instinctually will like throw your foot out in front of it so it doesn't shatter when it hits the
yeah,
floor. You know that move?
yeah,
um,
I do that sometimes with my axes, which is really really dumb. Where
yeah,
like it'll bounce back and I like try to like kick it and I'm like, nope, stop, like don't do
don't do
that.
that. He did that with a kitchen knife. It like fell. It was like a it was like a 10-inch Italian chef's
Oh,
knife, and it stuck in his foot. Like it stuck there. Like it
oh
when it
my
fell,
god.
it stayed like through his shoe and in his foot. He was like, "Why the fuck did I
Ugh.
do that?" Such a like an instinctual thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, you kind of answered my question already. I was gonna ask if you ever do some instinctually stupid shit like that, but yeah, you
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. You definitely yeah, you definitely can't pass all the human traits that we have to like try to stop ourselves from like doing things like that. Like my buddy Bill, like he was like, my dad was the type of guy that like, if you drop something sharp, he didn't tell me to back away. Like he was the type of guy that told me like throw the hammer up to the roof because like it's easier than having to climb the ladder, right? So it's like yeah, so it's like there's two different types of people in the world. I guess it kind of just depends like how you were raised, but yeah, I'm pretty good nowadays about like backing away from like a bouncing axe, but every once in a while I still try to like stop it, and I'm like come on, don't do dumb stuff. So
I imagine axe throwing's kind of like bowling. Like whenever you first start doing it, it's a total like social alcohol thing, and then when you get serious, you're like, okay, no more booze. I gotta keep my head on a swivel. They
yeah,
just opened up an axe throwing place here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and
nice.
it's like it's a total like drink and throw some axes and whatever. But I imagine the next step is like, okay, no more. Did that work for
Yeah,
you? Is that how you kind of got into it? Was it a social thing?
yeah, 100%. Like I went, for just like a hangout, join a new league kind of thing. Like was totally expecting it to just be like a casual thing I do on the weekend or during the week or whatever. Um, I very quickly learned like, oh, there's a group here that like is really competitive. There's a few people here in my home league, like my buddy James Gregg, and Brett Hartman, and trying to think of some like OGs, Nathan Ford, Vale Cook. So like there's some guys here from the Austin area that are all very incredibly competitive, right? So like we all kind of took off from just like the standard like, oh, this is just league, this is just for fun, to like, no, we want to be some of the best in the world.
Yeah.
So we figured out pretty quickly like how to kind of improve and adapt to like all these different things. My buddy Jeff Cope, who was actually my very first coach, he went to Canada in 2019, and then came back with a new throw. And I was like, oh, like what's this new throw you're doing? And like we call it the Canadian flick. So it's like everyone, kind of used to like a hammer grip, and you kind of pull this big move to like, over the head kind of thing. And he came back and he was literally just holding the axe like this, where like the head's here, and he was just tossing it like really light. And we were all just like, what are you like, how is that working? Like, what is happening? And it was like way more accurate. And like he was having a few drops because I think at the time he was just a little too choked up on the handle, and he wasn't getting quite enough like rotation and power. But once we all kind of like figured it out, like it was like, oh, like this is way more accurate. Like so instead of like hitting the 3 ring and the 1 ring, we were able to really kind of hone it in on that 5 ring. And so yeah, that really like you almost immediately started seeing like people that were adopting that throw their points, their average points per game almost went up like by 10 points almost every match. So it was pretty incredible. And now, like, I'd say like the average thrower in Austin, like just in general, like they're progressing much quicker. I think because they have guys like us in their leagues that are, kind of coaching them and saying like, hey, here's what to do. Here's the type of access to buy. Cause like when we all started, we were throwing on pine boards. We were throwing with terribly profiled axes. There was no such thing as like an axe throwing axe. There were no custom handles. There was none of that when we all started. Like it was, you buy a Cold Steel, a Shop Pro, or a Prandy German style. Like those were your three options. And like that's pretty much what everyone was throwing until we all kind of figured out like, oh, okay, there's these vintage plumb heads that people are making custom handles for. And then Waddle started to make axes specifically for axe throwing. They're all profiled really well. There's just like now there's like all sorts of crazy like axe makers and people are forging their own heads now. And like there's a company called Distal Steel that has been making some axe heads for guys across the U.S. But this guy Marcus Brown out of Detroit kind of was the person that started that process. And then I'm trying to think of like Jessica Renner. She's an amazing woman, and she does custom handles and all this. Like she does trophies and all this stuff. But she also started like making her own axe head, kind of based off of Council Tools Flying Fox, but it's called a Bear Claw. So it's just got about the same kind of profile, but with more of like a plumb head style like blade, just to kind of get a bit better coverage and things like that. So it's like the difference between throwing 4 years ago and now is significantly different when you start out, because everyone kind of knows like how to throw and you have a much better coaching and things like that. And then just the variety of axes, I think really kind of plays to anyone. It's a very inclusive sport. It's very like literally anyone can walk in the doors and learn how to throw, and doesn't really matter your age or your gender or anything like that. Like anyone is able to come in and throw as long as you have the ability to kind of move your arms. So it's like we have people that throw in wheelchairs. We have much older gentlemen like Steve Malby is one of our oldest throwers. He's in his 70s. He's been on ESPN a couple times like for axe throwing and things like that. Like everyone calls him Pops, but he's an incredible guy. But yeah, it's a really really cool sport, man. Like, and I've obviously become very invested in it. So
Yeah, man, it sounds kind of like the Texas Hold'em explosion, several years ago, where you, I don't know, the thought of like watching people play cards is like, no, I'm not. That's not gonna go anywhere ever.
yeah,
And you start to have these like celebrity poker players. It sounds like the axe throwing is sort of going in that direction where it's like throwing axe. What's that for? Like that's so silly. And then now
yeah,
it's like there's competitions that you can win money for it. It's televised. It's come a long way from just buying an axe at Home Depot. There's like a whole industry where people are like building handles and forging their own heads and I don't know, so on and so forth. Like putting little inlays in there. That's pretty cool, man. And it's cool that you get to, I don't know, you were sort of there like when it was groundbreaking. Do you feel like part of this like elitist club of like, yeah, I was doing this before it was cool?
I definitely don't feel like like an elitist, because I always try to be the guy who walks into like the newest person and welcome them in and kind of give them some coaching or whatever. Just find them like just try to like really try to bring people in. Like I always like, I think growing up I always kind of felt like an outsider, so it's like I very much so try to be that for other people, like that person that kind of extends their hand out and be like, hey, you're definitely welcome here. Like so yeah, I for me personally, like I don't feel like I have any, it's like I don't feel like I have any sort of like elite tendencies. I just try to really make sure that like people understand. It's like it's like depending on what league you're in and like how much people care about like this being there. It's like every league is slightly different. Like we have newbie leagues now. We have rec leagues. There's leagues dedicated to just like service industry people who like just want to show up and drink and have fun. And then we have like like Urban Access, our Wednesday Green League, is our only Premier League, and it's like for people that are really trying to like push the limit of like what we can do. And there's a new rule set too, where you have to be a lot more accurate. Like you can't bleed outside the circles, and then you have to hit a 1 inch by 1.5 inch square from top to bottom for a clutch. So it's stuff like that where it's just like it's way harder. And I think Waddle too has kind of become a bit more like that, where it's like it's a much more accurate throwing game, where it's like your bullseye and your kill shots and Waddle are both 1.5 inches. So it's like you have to be very dedicated to like figuring out like how to be as accurate as possible and have a very simplified throw. So yeah, I mean, there's guys that have written books about how to throw the perfect throw, like Ryan Smith, who was the 2020 champion. Then you have guys like Mike Philibon, who every event, I think besides 2 last year, he won. So he won the world championship for knives and hatchet this past year. He won the largest event of the year, which was Angrywood out in Oklahoma. And so yeah, like there's some really, really talented people out there that are just like killing it right now. And so yeah, so I'm just happy to be a part of the group that's kind of finally progressing to kind of be close to the top level. Like I'm 11th in the world right now in hatchet for Waddle. So it's like, yeah, I'm finally figured out a few things that like work for me, and like figuring out like, what axe works and like how to keep my elbow tucked in my wrist, and how I want it. And like, it's a mad science of like body mechanics studies, basically.
Yeah, man. Yeah, like pendulum, simple machines. Like if it's weighted at one side and lighter on the other, you got to kind of figure out that weird like body math. I don't even know what. I'm sure science is like screaming right now. What body math?
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm saying. All this sounds a lot like it sounds so interesting and like so much fun, and there's so much like it's like a ripple effect, and then you get into once you get into axe throwing, then you get into there's the social aspect, there's the customizing of axe. All this sounds amazing. What's the worst part about axe throwing? Like what's the worst? If you were like, all right, it's all fun and games, but be prepared to like not be able to practice in your apartment, or like be prepared to store 99 axes because you will acquire a lot of them.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what type of throw you are. Like, you don't have to own 40 axes. You could own 2 and do everything, right? But I think the worst part about axe throwing is just having been a part of it for the last 4 years. It's still in development. A lot of stuff, like the sport itself, is kind of still in development in a lot of ways, where it's kind of constantly evolving. And sometimes the evolution doesn't. It's very political, where it's like you have 2 organization heads that are kind of like very different, but also similar in ways, where it's like you have these kind of heads of staff that don't really listen to kind of everyone else, and they don't really communicate super well with like the general public of like throwers. They just kind of make these decisions, and they say, all right, you have to accept this now. And it's like, well, what about this and this? And it's like, I feel like the feedback loop is a little slower than it probably should be, to respond to certain things. Like when Premier rules were introduced, for example, from the IETF, that was after basically 2 years of not really hearing from the IETF. Pandemic happened, all their venues in Canada got shut down, and then a lot of the venues here in the US were able to start opening back up, but they weren't doing anything. Like they weren't hosting any events, they weren't trying to promote US based events or anything like that. And it's like, what are you doing? Like, why is there no communication going out from your organization to all these people that care about this sport? And then you had Waddle, which used to be ran by another guy, like the original founder of Waddle, used to also be like the commissioner. And just after Worlds this year, he kind of transferred that power over to Mike Morton, who's now the new commissioner. And I think since then, I think we're starting to see a bit more of that communication that I think we want to see. Like I think it's it's happening in a way that I think is better for the community in general. And Waddle did a really great job, like dealing with all the stuff, with the pandemic, right? So like they hosted the Quaddle leagues. When things started to open back up in the U.S., they were able to start, opening up venues and doing leagues again, and then start doing events again. And like the venues all had support from Waddle that I feel like the IETF didn't necessarily provide to their venues. And like we had a whole championship, like we did a US Open all during the pandemic, with Waddle. And IETF, like we didn't have IETC for the last 2 years. So this June is the first time we've had it since 2020. So I think it's very different. And I wish like it wasn't as political or as like, kind of like, they have these kind of strongholds and like there's no real like feedback loop between the community and the people kind of running things. But I also understand it's like they're running for-profit businesses and they have to make money, they have to pay their employees, like they got to do all this stuff. And I understand like that definitely takes time and energy, and we probably don't see a lot of the harder decisions that they have to make. So I definitely understand that. I guess for me it's like I would just kind of want to be I guess have a bit more insight into those things as a thrower, because it definitely affects me, right? It affects my venue, it affects me as a thrower. Like I have to buy new axes depending on rule changes and things like that. Like so like there are things that kind of trickle down and affect the community as a whole. And if you are a thrower that is I only want to own 2 axes, I don't want to pay for a bunch of different axes, yada yada yada, or like they just don't have the extra money to really go out and buy new axes every time the rules change, like it does potentially affect that person. So, and I think the end goal is to make the sport as inclusive as possible, while also making it challenging, right? Like you don't want everyone to be able to immediately go and hit a perfect game every time, right? Like that should be a difficult thing that people want to achieve, not just something that anyone off the street can walk in and do. So I think just that aspect of the sport I think could be better. So
you jarred something in my memory. I recently listened to an interview with Tony Hawk, and he was talking about when he first started skateboarding. It was like surfing was kind of like the thing, and no one was doing what he was doing. Like he never fathomed like, oh, I'm gonna make a living skateboarding. He just started doing like tricks. Like he started doing shit that people have never seen before. And now it's like, now if you're not doing these tricks that have never been seen before, it's like, oh, well then you can't even compete. Do you think that there's any rule, any room for maybe breaking some of these rules, or any room for like a Tony Hawk-esque a person to incorporate like axe tricks that we've and now it's normal. Like now we see these tricks and we're like, oh yeah, that's a double ollie. I'm just murdering these terms. I don't really know about skateboarding, but like a video game. Like he never thought like, oh, I'm gonna have a video game. I'm gonna have a skateboard named after me, a video game. Like there's this whole Tony Hawk industry based around skateboarding because he kind of paved the way. Do you feel like there is, since this is like kind of groundbreaking right now ish, I know it's been around a pretty good stint now, but do you foresee anything like that happening, like somebody coming in and doing, I don't know, a fucking I can't even fathom it right now. I don't even know what they're like. Nobody does at this point. But do you?
So I mean, if you think about like in general, like axe throwing and knife throwing, like all those things have been around for a long time, right? Like it's not like it just started 10 years ago.
Right.
But like the competitive side of it, like, and what we're doing is unique in the sense of like it's there's a rule set that's generalized, and like there's all these things, right? But then you have guys like my buddy Walthrax, Black Metal Axe, Berserker Circus is what he calls his whole like thing. But Berserker Circus is specifically for the guys that just want to do like trick shots and like accuracy throws and things like that. So like they'll do things like throwing from 47 feet away from the target, bunch of different trick shots with different types of axes. They weld together the metal S-wing heads, like just melt. He had one where he just welded 3 different heads together and was like throwing this big like monstrosity of an axe kind of thing. I mean, they'll throw anything. And, there's some dude from Russia that posts all this stuff that he just throws to the target, like anything from like a chair to like a screwdriver. So it's like there's people out there that I think they will always kind of innovate and do these crazy things. And I think it's really just like I think it's exciting because it does add a little bit of like oh crap, like there's more possibilities out there, like there's other things we could be doing. And I think that's like where like IETF does a lot of like skills challenges at their events as well usually. So you'll have like competitions where you do like time trials is one of my favorites because you have to do it's across 4 lanes and you have to do 4 regular overhand throws, 4 underhand throws, and then 4 1.5 rotation throws, all within 50 seconds. And like you like start on one side, you throw all 4 throws, you tap the other wall, you reset, and then you do the next 4, tap a wall, and then you do all that within 50 seconds. So I think that's interesting just because it's like you have to be really accurate, but you also have to throw like underhand and overhand and 1.5, which is like throwing with the blade facing you, but you're throwing it at the target and it's going to land like where the blade's in the wood and then the handle's sticking straight up. So it's like, there's things like that where you have to learn how to like actually throw the axe from almost any distance basically, and kind of figure out like how to play with like how do I become more accurate, even though it's like I'm now throwing a different throw from a different distance, right? So it's like do I aim higher? Do I like need a longer handle? Like there's a lot of those like things that you kind of have to learn when you start messing around with that stuff. So it gets interesting for sure. But then you have like duels, and so you have like 2 people throwing at the same target to try to get a score, or like ambidextrous, like throwing 2 axes with each hand. We did a triples game when I was in Oklahoma. So you have 3 people all aiming at a 1.5 inch like bullseye and then a 1.5 inch kill shot, stuff like that, where it's just like like it gets real interesting real quick when we start doing stuff like that. Or I think Throw Ohio, which was another major tournament that we had last year, they were doing duels. Yeah, they were doing dual big axes. So you had 2 people throwing, at least 23-inch handle like big axes. So that was really fun to watch.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. You mentioned I was just looking at my notes that I take throughout the show. You mentioned Buddy's podcast that has an axe throwing podcast. If anybody wants to like dig deeper and learn more about it, what's the name of that podcast?
It's literally called N Axe Throwing Podcast.
he put as much thought into it as I did on mine. It's just a shitty podcast. It's just,
N Axe Throwing Podcast. Yeah. It's my buddy Bill Feinberg, who was a thrower here in Austin, and he threw IETF here with me at Urban Axes. He just recently moved to Oklahoma City. Now he's throwing out of a venue there. Cannot think of the name of it, but my friend Ben and Jen Gaddy own that venue. But he's interviewed like 9 people, different axe throwers, and basically just kind of like asked like about life before axe throwing, and then like how they kind of got introduced to the sport, and like what they do as far as like how they like to throw and all these different things. So like I was on there, a few other people that I introduced to him were on there. So it's a fun podcast to listen to. I think it's definitely interesting.
Yeah. I have some friends that I work with now, and they're just now getting into axe throwing. They're like all jazzed about it. So I imagine them like listening to this and going, "What's the name of that fucking podcast? I want to listen to that."
Yeah.
So they're just kind of like just getting into it. It's pretty fun and exciting. Michael, we're kind of at the point in the podcast where if we didn't cover anything, buddy, like this is your time to shine. If you want to give a PSA to anybody out there, totally up to you.
I mean,
if not, you can pass it back, and we'll
I would just say, like, if you're interested in axe throwing in general, find your local venue, go check it out. I think for the most part, it's like almost any venue I've been to around the U.S., and I've been to quite a few right now. Like they're always super welcoming. I think like most venues, like they do a really good job of like introducing you to the sport, kind of giving you an intro into the sport. But like, if you're really actually interested in it, like, um, you know, go find a league, go like talk to them and like show up on a league night and like see how people are interacting. I think the community, like going into an axe venue, just throwing to throw at a wall, you're like, okay, that's cool. But I think seeing like how people are at league and like how that competition works and things like that, I think is really cool, because I don't know of any other professional sport where you hug your opponent before and after you throw axes. But like if you go back and watch like the World Championship from 2019 or 2020, it's like these guys like respect each other so much. And like, I think once you make it on TV, most people kind of stop caring about who wins or loses. I think people are just they're just so happy to be there at that point, because those competitions are much larger than just the 8 people or 6 people that you see on TV, right?
Yeah.
Like the one that we had in 2020, I was there, and we had, I think it was 164 competitors that boiled down to the top six, hatchet throwers. So it's like, you're only seeing a very small part of that tournament, right? Like you're only seeing kind of the best of the best from the weekend. But again, it's like every single person that walks in those doors, like they're giving you a hug, you're giving you a handshake, like it's like they're like, dude, like it's so good to see you. Like even people I've never met, I'm like, hey, like I know you because I've seen your name on the leaderboard, or like I've heard of you, or like you see them on Facebook or whatever. So it's like, I think it's just so cool that like I have this kind of extended axe throwing community family that's out there, that whether I like know them in person or like I might just meet them the next time I go to this tournament, wherever, it's like it's almost like instantly like we're just like, hey, we have something to talk about, like we have this this sport and things that we have interest in. It's always cool to like meet new axe throwing makers. I met this guy like at Worlds this past year. I met this guy named Kyle Durant, who was one of the nicest human beings I've ever met. But he owns an axe throwing venue, and he manufactures his own axes called Cascadia. He's out in, I think, Bend, Oregon. But he's just one of the coolest people I've ever met. And he made this like incredibly immaculate, like Japanese style, like woodworking handle. It's like a $1,200 axe, which you're like, who the hell would spend $1,200 on an axe? But it's like, I mean, he was literally making custom tools to like make the pieces, and like he's just an incredibly cool guy, and like super dedicated to his craft, and one of the best people I've ever met. So it's like, it's stuff like that where it's just like, it's like I never would have thought that I would have had this connection with some guy with big ass skull tattoo on his head, and it's just like, it's like you just it's literally anyone that you meet through the sport. I think it's just like, for the most part, like I've never really had very many bad connections with people or like bad interactions, and it's like it's just a lot of fun, and I really love to see that the sport continues to grow and it gets more competitive, because like I'm the type of person, it's like I love to push myself to be at that top level. So I think, yeah, if you're interested, definitely go check out a league. Like whether you join immediately or not, like that I think is going to be the best insight into like kind of how the world of community, the world of axe throwing, getting introduced to that community really works. So
yeah, cool, man. I wanted to talk a little bit before we get to the poop story. I wanted to talk a little bit about Facebook. Did you say you were gonna like what happened with Facebook last night, man?
oh gosh, yeah. So I keep getting banned for making sarcastic, stupid jokes. So the first one was like, I was like, I think I said something along the lines of like, man, people are out here like willing to shoot each other over gasoline, like when there was that gas shortage. And that was the first time I was like, I didn't threaten anyone. All I said was people are getting shot by other people. But because I guess the way I worded it, Facebook was like, you banned for however much time. And I was like, what the hell? And then there was another one where like I was just being like, the most recent one, I got banned for like 7 days from being able to post. I'm still banned from like groups for like another like 28 days or some shit. All I literally said was I want to punch the guy who created autocorrect. Not actually threatening the person so much as just like this fictional character in my mind of like whoever created, like obviously yes, whoever created autocorrect is a real person, but I'm not actually going to go punch that person. Like I'm just being an ass, right? Like I'm just saying this sarcastic thing. And Facebook's just like, yeah, nope, like you can't say that, that's bullying. And I'm like, what? Like, what the hell is wrong with you guys? Like, and so I
Yeah.
even like try to appeal it, but they're like, oh, it's gonna be 30 days before we even read this shit. Like, like, and I'm just like, dude, like they've gotten it way out of control. And I think what it is, it's like pretty much anything having to do with any sort of violence inside of a group post,
Yeah.
which a lot of the times that's where I get these like bans from, is because I'm posting like a group chat or like a thing that's um like on like the waddle board or something like that, where it's like I'm in a group with other people, and for whatever reason they police those groups super heavily. So I'm just like, dude, like I'm on a smear campaign right now to like ruin Facebook for their terrible algorithm. So
Yeah, your rebuttal should be like, I didn't even type the thing about autocorrect. It autocorrected to punch the guy. I said,
yeah,
I was like gonna say hug. I wanted to hug the
yeah,
guy. He's helping
I
me
wanted
out.
to hug him, but yeah,
Yeah, I'm a
I was
terrible
talking
spy.
about fruit punch, and you guys are out here making me look terrible. I can't stand social media sometimes, and like I've gotten rid of like pretty much everything that's not Axon related, and I'm
Uh-huh.
still like, just I can't seem to figure out the way to get past being a smart ass, I guess. So yeah, if you're a smart ass and you like sarcastic remarks, probably don't have a Facebook.
Yeah. Michael, have you ever shit your pants? Has there ever been a time where you maybe had an accident or a friend of yours uh maybe pooped themselves and
So I think we talked about the one good one I had last time, which was the sharding on the date. Um, so I haven't had any like crazy stories or anything like that since then. I did figure out I'm not actually lactose intolerant. I think I was just having gut issues
yeah,
since the last time we talked. But yeah, I mean, I haven't recently, so
that's
that's
good.
good news.
That
Um,
totally flies, man. I
yeah,
sometimes want, I'm like, please just don't have a shit story. Like it hasn't been that long since we talked. You know?
yeah. I mean, I have two Chihuahuas, and they constantly shit in the house, and that's enough for me.
Yeah,
One of they both kind of get in trouble for eating other dog shit, so there's
yeah,
that. So yeah,
yeah. I know. What is that? I know I've got a puppy and she early on, luckily she's kind of gotten out of it, but she would like, I'm like, oh, don't eat that. Why don't
yeah,
you've got a really balanced diet. Like, please don't do
yeah,
that. There's no
yeah. We
need for
were
that.
we were uh we were ferret sitting for like a week while my buddies were
Oh,
moving down from North Carolina, and man, I've never smelled a stinkier animal before. Like the
yeah,
ferrets smell terribly. We had them like locked up in a small bathroom away from the
yeah,
dogs. Like the dogs didn't even know they were in the apartment because like we wouldn't let them near them because my dogs are crazy. So so they didn't even know they were in the apartment. But like anytime we'd like open up the door to go into the bathroom, like change out their like a little pad or like give them food and water, like you just be hit with this waft of like ferret stink, and you're just like, ugh, like oh my god.
yeah.
I was like,
They just,
I don't know how anybody keeps ferrets.
I know. Yeah, they like omit a smell from their pores or something. Like it's just just ferret smell.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. It's
That's
like
fine.
people that keep skunks that like remove the stink sack. I'm like, yeah, but it's still a skunk. It's like, what are you doing?
You you own a rodent. Let's just get
Yeah.
down to
Like,
it. Oh, sick,
and
man.
if its name isn't Pepe Le Pew, I don't even care.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Michael, you
I
did
only
great.
like
Go ahead.
I was gonna say I only like rapey French skunks. That's all.
Careful, mate. You'll get banned. Careful. You
Right?
can't.
Yeah. Oh, whoops. Sorry, Facebook.
Yeah. Yeah. I want my skunks to be French and rapey. Very rapey. If it's not that, then I'm out. Michael, thank you so much for doing this, man. This is a blast. I appreciate you bringing everybody up to speed and educating the listeners on axe throwing and the whole culture around it.
Yeah.
That's it for us. Play us out, Shitty Ukulele.